Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic today. Let's go for it. People who are sure that they have had a paranormal experience, what happened, and what made you sure that it was a paranormal experience. Please remember to like, share, say hello, and subscribe. When I was a kid, maybe 5 or 6, my two parents, me, my brother, and my sister were hiking a mountain. We stopped at the top of the mountain to eat and rest. I saw a little path, and me being my dumb 5-year-old self decided to run down it. My brother followed me. He is 2 years younger. As I ran down the path ended in a cliff. I couldn't stop. But at the cliff edge, I bumped into a solid unseen force. It then pushed me back into my brother, causing both of us to fall over and stop before we fell off the edge of the cliff. Then I remember my mom came running down the path to see us fallen like that. Looking back, I think the path I saw was one made by rainwater and wasn't a path at all. Part of me thinks it was a dream, but my mom remembers the situation. She had taken her backpack off to get sandwiches. In that moment of distraction, I and my brother ran off. She then sprinted after us as she knew we were running towards a cliff. When I was about 5 or 7, but not 6, my family was having a small family gathering of a few family, friends, and close family, My grandfather's apartment had a walk-in pantry, and in that walk-in pantry, there was a window. I would always lean out of the window because I was bored or whatever. I think it was mostly because I was a little shorter than the window in order to fully look out of it. Anyway, in this set of apartments, there was a sandbox in the corner of what my grandparents lived. The apartments are L-shaped. I leaned out the window and saw the little boy playing in the sandbox. He was playing with a wooden truck. My grandfather was a craftsman, so he made toys sometimes out of spare supplies. I guess my mom caught me staring, then came over to see what I was looking at. She looked out the window in the direction I was looking at, and then asked me what I was looking at. I told her the little boy in the sandbox. She asked me to explain what he looked like, because she couldn't see him too well, or something, and I explained to her that he had on a blue and white striped shirt with overalls, and his hair was a sandy blonde. I asked if I can go out and play with him, and my mom told me to go wait in the living room. She came out 5 minutes later and told me that dinner was about to be served and that I could play with him tomorrow. I agreed and never saw the kid again. It turned out that I had explained to a T the dead child of a family friend in that group who had died 5 or 6 years before through a car accident. The women had started crying. That's why I was sent out. I have so many ghost stories. This one was a lot more recent. In 2018, before the death of a family member, we had gone to visit her at her house, my aunt. The house itself is almost 100 years old. My father's grandfather built it from the ground up, and it was one of the first houses on that street, as I've been told. My dad had lived there too when he was growing up. I did as well when we would visit. Anyway, my aunt's room was at the end of this tiny hallway, where right across the hallway was the door to the bathroom and the door to the rest of the house, across from each other. I had to use the bathroom and was just finishing up washing my hands when I look up and see this woman in complete white. White hair, white nightgown, just completely white and pale. I stopped dead in my tracks and just sort of stared. No one else was living with my aunt. She was completely alone in her part of the house. The door to the bathroom and the door to the rest of the house were both open, and this woman was standing in the doorway to the rest of the house, me in the bathroom. My dad passed me to go see my aunt, and just as he did, this woman stepped out toward me and turned in that direction of my aunt's room and walked in. I didn't move to see if she went in, just sort of followed her with my eyes from where I was standing. I saw my mom come in and decided to join them in my aunt's room. Walking into my aunt's room, she was completely alone. No one else was there. That woman had just vanished. Later, I told my parents and explained to them what I saw, how the woman looked. She had a bit of a crooked nose, and my dad just kind of looks up at me through the rearview mirror. We were in a car on our way back home, and tells me that that was his grandmother. The woman I had seen was his grandmother. Kind of makes sense. That house is the type of house to go creak in the night. One of many stories I have of this house. Like I said before, there are more stories. Okay, again, I haven't experienced anything, so I'm not going to say I'm skeptical or not, but if there was going to be some type of haunting, this familial spirits make a lot of sense to me. What do you guys think? Years ago, I had a recurring about 3 times dream of me at this strange house in the middle of nowhere. Not really anything special, just me doing random stuff like gardening, hanging laundry in front of this house. Well, fast forward 2 years later, I was driving with my husband in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, when I swear I saw the house from my dreams. I asked my husband to slow down as we passed, which he thought was weird, but the house looked exactly like the one in my dreams from years ago. The only thing I feel I cannot be explained at all is my grandmother's extremely haunted house. When my dad was a kid, they moved into this 2-story house out in the country. The whole family has a lot of strange stories. My grandma says once she was home alone and all the kids were at school. She was sitting in her kitchen drinking coffee. She heard a knock at the front door, so she went to answer it. There was no one there. When she went back to the kitchen, the water in the sink was running full blast. She turned the water off and a few minutes later heard another knock. She came back to the kitchen and the water was on again. Another time, her and my aunts were the only people home and they were upstairs. Both of them heard a loud crash from downstairs, like one of the big windows in the living room had been shattered. She ran downstairs, fully expecting to see glass everywhere, but nothing was disturbed and there was no apparent source of the crash. Another time, the whole family was downstairs and could hear my aunt's guitar upstairs being strummed. They all have a lot of stories about that house. I've never been there myself. The house isn't even standing anymore. TLDR. My friend and followed a creature that had glowing eyes and no body until it literally disappeared into earth. Years ago, I was outside smoking at my friend's house. It was fall. It was around 10 or so p.m. and I heard a rustling in a patch of woods nearby. This patch of woods separates his place from the neighbors on the other side, and the patch slopes down a hill until it continues on into a forest behind the house. Anyway, I pull out my phone light and investigate. I grew up in the country, so I can usually tell what is walking around based on the sounds and the cadence of footsteps. It sounded like a deer, hesitant footsteps, very deliberate. So I shine my light and see 2 reflecting eyes about chest high off the ground, and the tree behind it where its body should be. So I briskly go inside to get my friend. He sees the same thing I do, so if I'm crazy, so is he. We decide that I'll move further down the wood line and he'll walk from the top down toward me. When this thing wasn't looking at you, it was invisible. You could only see its eyes reflecting off of light like a dog's. But you could hear it walking, and you could see leaves move where it walked. We would whistle at it, and it would turn to look, so that's how we tracked it. So, I was the closest to it. My friend and I had moved into a kind of pincer formation, and I was about 15 feet from it. It moved towards a ditch, and the rainwater had dug out over time and got lower and lower in stature. The last time I saw it, I whistled and saw its eyes staring at me from underneath the fallen leaves in the ditch. Then it disappeared. I called to my friend, and he rushed over. We cleared away the leaves, thinking there was an entrance of some kind. Nothing, just solid earth. We tried to get video of it initially, but our shitty iPhones at the time couldn't see shit in the dark. The weirdest thing about it was that neither of us ever felt like we were in danger. There was no primal sense of fear or dread. It was like our brains just couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. It reminded me of what H.P. Lovecraft protagonists describe when they witnessed the eldritch, minus the insanity. We still have no idea what it was. We recounted the story to each other just to make sure one of us hadn't lost our minds and we witnessed the same things. He still lives there and says he's heard it out walking around a few times since over the years, but it's been a long time since the last time he's heard it. He has 5 dogs, and they all lose their shit when they hear anything outside. He says the times he's heard it since, it's like his dogs could give a shit less. They don't even look in the direction of it. Maybe it's some kind of nature spirit or something. Who knows? Maybe it was a creature of the forest. You looked for it but didn't disturb it or try to harm it, and it returned in kind. So maybe it's just a forest guardian, or maybe it was just a possum or something. Who knows? My dad, I hadn't spoken to him in years, appeared in my dream and seemed to show me that I would marry my then boyfriend and said goodbye. He died that night, and I didn't find out about it until the next morning. The first thing I said was, I saw him last night. I did marry my now husband, and we have 2 kids. It's been 8 years since my dad died. Had an apartment that I'm pretty sure was haunted. Woke up one night and jumped out of bed and ran out of the room. Stopped a little ways outside the room with my heart pounding. Nearly a year later, my girlfriend, now wife, had the exact same thing happen in the same apartment in pretty much the exact same way. Even stopped running about the same place. Another incident occurred with my daughter when she was 3. My brother, who had a son that passed away before my daughter was born. One day, as we're driving near where my brother had lived at the time, my daughter pointed straight at the house and got all excited, saying, "That's where cousin lives. That's where cousin lives." He had been dead 4 years, and she had never been to that house before. My first apartment was a rickety old place that still had the original fixtures from the 1940s. Both my roommate and I had experiences, including with a whole room full of our friends. This was my first experience with our ghost roommate. I was in a musical review at the time and would come home with full show makeup and hair done every night around 9 p.m. This was our first night in the place. For reference, we were on the second floor above the laundry room. You could feel a person's footsteps on the balcony out front before they got to the door, because the place was so flimsily built. My roommate was my high school best friend, a 200-plus pound, 6'2", flamboyant bear of a guy. My roommate was still at work when I got home. I had made a beeline for the bathroom to wash off my makeup. While I was washing my face, I felt heavy footsteps walk up to our front door, heard the key turn the lock, and felt the front door open and close. Then I felt those same heavy footfalls come down the hall and felt a presence standing behind me. Doing my best to rinse my eyes thoroughly, I said, "Hey Jeff, give me a minute." Once my face was rinsed, I looked up to greet him, only to find that there was no one there. This exact pattern happened every night that first week. Finally, I had had enough of it. After the now familiar experience of hearing or feeling the footfalls up to the door unlock open and close, the footsteps coming down the hall, and the presence behind me, I calmly finished washing my face and looked into the mirror right where a tall man's face would be. I looked right at where I felt he was and said, "Hi, my name is Buddha Girl, and the other guy is Jeff. We're your new roommates. I don't mind you being here, but this is really freaking me out, and I'd like you to stop. Thanks." It never happened again, and he never showed himself to me as aggressively again. I was sober and not prone to hallucinations. I have no other explanation for what happened other than some intelligent presence attempting to intimidate me. I have a couple, but perhaps the strangest is that I used to see eyes watching me through the banister slats when I was upstairs in my bedroom as a very young child. I used to just think it was my mom keeping an eye on me. I mentioned this to her years later and realized that there wasn't a chance in the world that any human would be able to fit in an appropriate way to peek through the bottom slat. It just wouldn't work, and she didn't know what I was talking about. I have aphantasia, so I cannot actually picture anything in my imagination, so I can't imagine this was just an overactive imagination either. The coolest thing about the posts here is that there are multiple ones that are very similar and back each other up without being related. I've seen more than I care to count and loved ones saying goodbye in a way that shouldn't be possible, in a dream or when they are somewhere else. I'm basically convinced. My ex and I were driving home one night on a back road, and we were going down a hill, so the headlights were pointing downwards. But we both saw at the bottom of the hill and off to the side of the road what looked like a small kid, human-looking feet pointed toward us, but had its head and back turned away from us. Since the headlights weren't directly on the kid, we couldn't quite make it out. It quickly turned its head toward us, but had no face or distinguishing features, but looked like a little kid's head. When we got to the bottom of the hill and the lights started to approach the thing, it took off flying with its giant feathers like a huge wingspan. Me and my ex looked at each other in disbelief, and I stepped on the gas. I'm still freaked and convinced, as well as my ex, that we saw some kind of spirit. I was having a sleepover at my house in the living room. I was the only one awake since I have terrible insomnia, and when I glanced toward my feet, there was a massive shadow standing over me. It reached the effing ceiling and had super broad shoulders. It definitely wasn't human. I screamed and jumped on top of my friend to shake her awake. By the time we turned on the lights, it was gone. I thought it might have been my dad at first playing a prank, but he was fast asleep in his bedroom and no one else was in the house. I still think about it and get shivers down my spine. Another one happened when I was younger. I was playing in my bedroom and felt something staring at me, so I looked up toward the doorway. An old man in a black suit was standing there, and as soon as I saw him, he disappeared. Strangely enough, I didn't panic, just resumed playing. but he stuck with me for years until my mom showed me pictures of my dead grandpa, who I never met. It was the man in the suit. No difference whatsoever. I recently bought a house and moved, but previously lived with my parents in the same house for about 10 years. It is right next to 2 cemeteries, a church, old Indian grounds right down the hill, and a 6-year-old boy was hit and killed by a dump truck right in front of our house back in the 80s. We, my parents and younger brother and sister, have always had uneasy and weird experiences at this house. Random noises here and there, the sound of chairs scooting on the floor upstairs when nobody was up there, extremely dark spots in the hallways at night, hearing another family member call, say your name when they weren't even home. I had my boyfriend over one day. We were home alone. My brother's room shared a wall with mine, and the hallway leading to our room was always the creepiest in my opinion. My boyfriend and I were just sitting in my room, on our phones when we heard 3 slow, distinct knocks on the shared wall. Again, nobody was home. I went in the room to make sure the cats or dog weren't in there, or maybe something fell and hit the wall. Nothing. My brother also wrestled, so my family would go out of town for a night or 2 for tournaments during wrestling season. I would usually stay home to take care of the dog and cats, and my boyfriend would stay with me. One particular time, they were gone, and my boyfriend and I were asleep in my bedroom. I had cracked the door open in case the dog or cats wanted to come in or out. I was fast asleep, and so was my boyfriend, when I woke up to something banging incredibly loud on the bedroom door, like so loud I thought someone was breaking in. Again, the door was slightly cracked, so if the dog or cats had been hitting it, it would have come completely open. As soon as I heard it, I shot up and saw that there were no animals in sight, and the door was still only slightly cracked. My boyfriend didn't wake up. I stayed awake for a good hour, unable to even move to face away from the door. I also had my cat for 14 years who recently passed in February. I woke up from a nap one day to the feeling of something laying on my feet, which is the spot he always loved to lay. We also had a family cat for 18 years who passed away in January 2021. My boyfriend and I were upstairs cooking, and I saw a flash of white go from the ground to the countertop. The cat was all white and was always jumping on the countertop. After that, my boyfriend and I both heard a meow. We had no other cats at this time and looked at each other the same time immediately when it happened. I went downstairs about to tell my mom about it, and she said before I even could, I have always 100% believed in the paranormal and would love to have more concrete experiences in the future. Reading the first paragraph of this story, I got some Pet Sematary feelings about this if you've read the book or watched the movie, and all I could think about was the old guy who was Herman Munster. He's like, wouldn't go down that road. And if you watch South Park, you get it too. It was night, and I was sleeping with my then young daughter. I happened to wake up to see a full-bodied apparition standing over me. It was male, brown hair. I gasped and turned away quickly. When I turned back around, he was gone. I wasn't dreaming, and as far as an intruder, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have just disappeared, and May would have grabbed me. I didn't hear him running off either. I've seen a couple at this point. The first was when I was 16. I was in the bathroom with the door open, headphones in, dancing in the mirror like teenagers do. I look over to the door, and there was a shadow person standing there, one hand on each side of the door frame and head cocked to the side like it's trying to figure out what I'm doing. I looked back to the mirror, realized what I had seen, turned back, and no one there, so I slammed the door shut. When I got the courage to venture out of the bathroom, I looked around the house and realized I was the only one home. The next one was a year or two later, walking out of the front door and down the steps in the bright daylight. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a man in blue pants and a red and white shirt. Of course, when I looked to see who it was, there was only green bushes and no one in the yard. I've also seen 2 UFOs, one of which someone else saw with me.